Hey
There you go.
everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. And I have a friend and podcast guesting expert. She is like the pitch queen, Angie Trueblood. And I always love chatting with you. And so I'm super excited to share your insights and your wealth of knowledge on the show for people.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here and to be chatting with you again.
Now, I just want to give people a quick sneak peek. So, you again are like this master of all things pitching, getting people on shows. And you have, I don't know how new it is, but I came upon it on LinkedIn and it was your flop files.
hmm
And I'm like, oh, they're so captivating. And I just think it's brilliant. And I learned so much from them. So, I quickly want to give people a quick
Yeah.
resource here and share that right off the bat.
Yeah. I basically changed the focus of my email newsletter. It didn't really have a clear focus. I mean, it was just sharing tidbits about podcast guesting and podcast hosting. And I have friends in the podcasting industry who send me less than ideal podcast pitches all the time. And I know when I hosted my show, Pitched, which is still available, the best episodes were the ones where I talked about pitches that were not ideal. And I just always had in my mind, I should just have something, I don't know what the content would be, that would highlight bad pitches, but also focus on how to fix them.
Yeah.
So I just did that. It was only a couple of weeks ago now at this point.
Yeah.
And each week I take a real pitch that a podcast host has sent to me. I anonymize it so you don't know who the host is, you don't know who is getting pitched or who did the pitching. I share a little blurb about what was wrong with it, like what needs to change to fix it, and then I rewrite it. And it is the highlight of my week. It is so fun just digging in, fixing, and kind of getting out. But I think it's helpful because readers can see one, what they're up against if they are pitching themselves or pitching their
Mhm.
clients. So I hope it's motivating of, okay, there's some really crappy pitches going around. I can do this. But second, it's not that difficult to fix a pitch that is off base. And by sharing week after week, you see the themes
Yeah.
over and over of what has gone wrong. And so my hope is that by seeing it being fixed in real time, it will improve the quality of the pitches the podcast hosts are getting because we want good guests on our shows. But when we can't see, what is it, the forest through the trees?
Forest for the trees. Yep.
Yeah. It's like you can't get to what this conversation could be when the pitches are as off base as they are. So if listeners think this is interesting, you can go to the podwisegroup.com/flop files and sign up. And immediately you'll get the first one that I ever sent just so you can see it's your
Yeah.
vibe or not.
I know it's so good. And it for me, it's like it's one thing to hear tips. Oh, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do this. But it's not until you see it and you
Mhm.
see the difference, you're like, oh, like it
Yeah.
just hits home so much better. And some of them are like amusing or like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen that 1,000 times.
But it's also good for me because I'm such an advocate when I train others in how to pitch on B plus work is fine. Like that is what we should be striving for. There's no perfect pitch,
Yeah.
and you don't want to spend all the time in the world doing it because you just don't know who's on the other side and what kind of content they're looking for. So there are times when I see something in a pitch and my gut is to fix everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, like you don't have to, it
Mm.
doesn't have to be perfect to
Okay.
work. So it actually helps me to figure out like when to pull back on my tendency to
Ooh.
correct everything.
That's a great point because I
Yeah.
think you could, whether you're doing it yourself or you have a team that's doing it,
Yeah.
like it can eat up a lot of time and
hmm
you don't realize it. And I've seen clients where they do have a team and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was going to cost that much to do whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how long? Let me ask you two
Yeah.
questions, two-part question. One is, how much time does it take?
hmm
And is it more like less pitches but quality pitches
hmm
versus like a numbers game?
Yeah, it's interesting. So over the summer, we started consulting with PR firms, and helping them optimize their podcast outreach strategies. And I do see that the number of pitches that they are used to sending is far greater than what we tend to send.
Hmm.
And I think it is really this balance, right, of quality versus quantity. Like you do have to get enough pitches out to be able
Hmm.
to get yeses, but you don't. I remember I had someone on my team one time, and she was a freelancer, like a contractor, and she had been pitching her client previously, and she said, I sent out 100 pitches last month. And I was like, okay, we're not going to do that.
Whoa.
Because there's just no way to take the time to research and personalize. So for our done for you clients, we pitch anywhere between 15, maybe 20 a month. And it takes, several hours a week, but it's worth it. I'd much rather be sending pitches that respectfully reflect our client so that they show up in the inbox and someone doesn't read them and think, oh, Lord, this person hired this firm to pitch her. So I think a lot of it is to professionally reflecting our client's brand, even when it's not a fit, and being able to get a response back from the host so that if it's not a fit the first time, maybe we can course correct, or for our next client, the door's open because we have built a relationship by respecting their time.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And how much research would you say should go into it? Like, are there key things that you look for?
Yeah. So everyone thinks, and a question I always get is, how many episodes do I need to listen to?
Mm,
And we don't really listen to full episodes of the shows that we pitch. We recommend that to our clients before they actually guest, to definitely
yes.
listen to the podcast, because you want to know what to expect from the host and how you can serve their audience. But for pitching, there's a podcast description in Apple Podcast. You can see their previous episodes in Apple Podcast. And then we hop over to their website and get a sense of, well, who is this host talking to? Like, what is their business? What is the relationship of this show to their business? And how can we help them fill that need, right? Like, how can we complement what they're trying to do with the show by guesting on it as an expert? We look at their social media just to make sure there's nothing wild and crazy that conflicts with
Mhm.
our clients. But you can learn a lot about a host and the intent of their show by looking at various online
Yeah,
platforms.
100%. And I've
Yeah.
done the same thing as well.
Hmm.
When you're crafting a pitch
Hmm.
for yourself or your team is pitching you,
Hmm.
are there differences in the approach?
It depends if either of us has a relationship with the
Uh,
host. So it's more about, is this a totally cold outreach, or is it someone that we know and have worked with before? If it is someone that I have a relationship with, I'm not sending them, a fully fleshed topic with bullet points and links
yeah.
to all my things. It's a really casual, hey, I had an idea for me to come on your show that I think might help your listeners out. What do you think about XYZ as a topic?
Mhm.
Right. But if it's someone that's totally new to us, there does need to be a little bit more of a warm up and level setting your credentials as to why would you be a guest on this show? Like, why is this a fit? And then expanding a little bit more on the topic.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Hmm.
And so when I get a bunch of pitches, I find it's really heavy on the person's credentials.
Yes.
They've done this, they've grown this, they whatever. And I almost feel like I got to dig around to be like, well, what the heck are they going to talk about?
Hmm.
Um, so would you say do not share any of the credentials and that kind of part and just focus on the topic? Like, what do you feel like is the priority when it comes to your pitch emails?
So the priority is always the topic. And I mean, it depends. The types of podcasts you and I are familiar with that often our clients want to guest on, they're not current event, they're not news, they're not
Yeah.
political. So those are a little bit of a different beast in how you pitch those types of shows. It's more traditional media, right? It's more journalists that you're reaching out to,
Yeah.
producers. But for the shows that we are pitching to, yeah, it's all about the topic and how we can convey, how we can serve that host's audience. And so part of that is level setting the guest, the potential guest, as an expert. So you have to include something in there about
Mm-hmm.
who this person is, what they do. And I like to include a little bit of a why they do it to kind of bring that bio to life. It should be I I used to say no more than 3 sentences. I'm now leaning towards 2, and we have some clients we only include 1.
Right.
And that's where you just have to flex some of your copywriting skills is to figure out, in this 3-paragraph bio that the client gave us, what is most important to conveying their expertise, but also a little bit of their personality very succinctly. So you want to give the host everything that they need and nothing that they don't. And
Yeah.
that's candidly where AI has been a little bit of a help for us because we can take a really long bio and ask it to condense it and then, zhuzh it from there with what
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
think is important, but it can definitely help with some of the wording.
I know AI is so handy for that.
I
I like
love it.
literally use it every day.
Yeah,
How can I
yeah.
make this more concise?
I know. That's like my primary prompt.
I know the same here.
And
So
then I'll be
funny.
like, and make it more interesting.
I know. Please just make this better.
Yes.
I know. It's super helpful.
Yeah.
So I was going to talk to you about the AI, but I want to step back just a
Okay.
little bit because a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are guesting on podcasts, they don't want to do it themselves and they have a team.
Hmm.
And so when you're teaching a team how to do this, like you have to have processes in place.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people talk about that part of pitching. They're all just about the pitch email.
Hmm.
So what do you recommend from like what do you teach your clients when you're consulting
Yeah.
about the process side of things?
Yeah. So, I mean, the strategy piece is important, right? You always start with the strategy. What's the goal? Who are we trying to get you in front of? And writing the pitch. And that really is a bit of a different skill set than implementing and executing and
Mm-hmm.
actually doing the pitching, the following up, and the scheduling. And so it really depends on the size of the team and how they are already organized, right? Like, so some of the PR firms that we work with, they have publicists who have 3 clients. Well, that publicist is going to be responsible for doing all of the pitching, all of the interacting with the host. And so there's not a whole lot of handing off of the process the way that we do it,
Right.
right? So internally for us, because all we do is pitch our clients for podcasts, we have someone who curates the pitch list. We have someone who takes the pitch template and personalizes it and sends the pitch to the host. My admin is the one who does follow up because the
Mm.
strategy and the topics have been decided on. The follow up can just get cranked out, right?
Ah,
And she also takes over and does the scheduling because those of us who are good at strategy suck at scheduling,
and
like
the
the
admin part
details.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's that piece of it. And then depending on the company and if they are just pitching a leader or if they're pitching numerous clients, there really is a project management piece to where do you need to see where each of your clients are in the process? Like, do you need to have a bird's eye view of, where you are on XYZ podcast for XYZ client? And so then that really steps more into project management. It's simple if you're just
Yeah.
pitching the leader of one company. But if
Yeah,
it's more, it becomes a little bit more complicated.
for sure. And it's like you have to have the follow up. There are a but like some moving pieces, so you have to be organized. Otherwise, you're sending out pitches and then nothing happens, and then
It's
like
pointless.
it
Like,
just falls through the cracks.
yeah, if you don't have a process and you're not committed to follow up, don't even pitch. I mean,
I
it
know.
is such a, extreme waste of time if you can't get the follow up done. And there's ways to automate, reminding yourself to send the follow up. There's ways to batch it. It's, it doesn't take us a long time to follow back up with the shows that
Yeah.
we've pitched.
So just make sure I understand correctly. So you will help an entrepreneur coach, consult, and train and work with them so that they can set their team up to do
Mhm.
all of this for them and have that strategy. Am I correct in that?
Correct. And
Okay.
we can either develop their strategy and the pitch list and hand that over to them as we coach them to implement. Or if they're like, no, I really want us to be able to develop, our strategy and be able to flex it as we need without coming back. Also, we do that,
Yeah.
like teach
Love it.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's sometimes as an entrepreneur, you feel like you got to wing it, figure it out,
Yeah.
hope that your team can just do it. It's
Yeah.
like we have too much going on.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just you have different seasons in the business. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you want to do a sprint where you are pitching and making sure that you're getting on these shows and you can book out the interviews over the next 6 months. Right. And so it may not make sense to outsource that. And then some of the firms that we have worked with, they have outsourced getting their clients booked on podcasts, but it's not cost prohibitive, but it is a really large chunk of money that they are spending to outsource. And so wanting to be more self-sustaining,
Mm,
let's take it in-house. Let's figure it out. We have PR experts. They know how to do it. They just don't know how to adapt it for the podcast
mm.
industry.
Interesting. Yeah, because you would think it would be the same. So
Yeah.
how is it different?
So a lot of the PR pitches that we see, there's a couple of things that are such easy fixes. Um, the first is that intro paragraph when you're writing an email to a colleague or a friend or a prospect, right? Hi, Susie. And then if you haven't talked to them in a while, there's some sort of nicety in there. If they're brand new, you introduce, oh, this is why I'm reaching out to you. I saw that XYZ, about you is complimentary to whatever it is about me. What I see in PR pitches or pitches that are going to podcast hosts written by PR
Hmm.
professionals, it often starts with a statistic or like a hook. Did you know that 52% of Americans struggle with XYZ? So it's like the hook of the story,
Oh, that's
which
weird.
yeah, it makes sense if it's going to journalists, right?
Yeah,
Because you're
yeah,
trying to really flesh out what that story is. But when you're emailing a host or a producer, you want to say the name of their podcast, acknowledge who it is that they speak to and who they help. And then, I mean, you're just being a human. Like, I'm
yeah,
reaching out because I'm representing a client, Bobby Joe, who I think might be a good fit as a guest on the show. I'll share a little bit about him or her and would love to get your thoughts. Like, it's not a perfection. It's not like, here's the right way to start it. It's just you
I
have to start it
know.
so it sounds like a human is writing it.
Ain't that the truth, man?
Girl.
Because sometimes it's like the first two paragraphs that I see, I'm like, whereas some, and there's a couple of, good companies out there, and they're like conversational.
Yeah.
Hey, and they're like just as if they're meet me on the side of the road. Oh, hey,
Hmm.
I saw you do this and I like this. And I thought this person would be good. And here's the
Yeah.
information. And so I'm like, okay, I know then that it's not a copy paste send, copy paste send.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
actually they're thinking it through and know who I am and what I'm about.
Well, and the other piece of it, and we do see this a lot as well, is a specific topic is never referenced. So it might be, a descriptor of our client just wrote this book, yada, 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 love to
Mm-hmm.
have an interview, but they haven't taken what the topic of the book is and morphed that into an interview topic. Like, unless it is a show that's interviewing authors about their books,
Yeah.
and there are some out there, you're not going to host, like, that's not the title or the topic of the interview. So you have to pull something out. And then you do have to tweak it to meet the audience of the
Yeah.
host. I have seen people will take so much care in that first paragraph and personalizing it. And, oh, I saw you interviewed Susie Smith, 4 weeks ago. But then the pitch, it's not personalized at all, like the actual topic. And so I recommend spend less time on, name dropping a previous guest that you saw on Apple Podcast and spend more time on explaining the concept of the topic that your client might want to speak about and why it would be relevant to the audience.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
for anyone, please sign up for the flop files because they're
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. Thank you.
I know. Um, I want to go back to the processes for a little bit
Yeah.
because we always look for ways to be more efficient. Automation is the big buzzword. Is there actually a way to automate some of those processes?
So it's interesting because, and I'm still learning about PR firms and how they do their pitching. I did have one ask me, like, is all of this being sent by hand, like individual emails? Yes. And I don't think that is always the way that other firms operate. Like there are tools out there, and
Mm,
there are even some like SaaS products to where it's kind of a database and you can mass send emails to a group of podcast hosts. So there are ways to do it, but not to do it well, or nothing that I have found.
yeah.
So we send every pitch email by hand, like someone hits send.
Yeah.
Uh, Shocking. But there are things like we start with a pitch template. Like we develop a very detailed, curated pitch template that has everything a host would ever need to know about our client, as many different topics as we think will be relevant to the types of shows that we're going to pitch them to. And that's sort of our starting point so that we're not reinventing the pitch every single time we send an email. Our We use ClickUp for project management,
Mm,
and we have a lot of automations in there to where once we have pitched the client, we change the status, a due date is automatically populated, it automatically assigns it to whomever is doing follow up. And we've kind of curated a system to where clients can have access to their pitch list. So there's a lot of things that you can do with tools to optimize the processes, but I'm not a big fan of figuring out a way to spray and pray
mm,
pitches without taking the human time to personalize them.
yeah. Agreed.
Womp
But
womp, I know.
I know. But yeah, it has to be done that way, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
I know. But at least, like you said, within the process, if you use a project management tool, there are ways that you can quote unquote automate or help the process along so that no balls are dropped and
Yeah.
it's being managed in an efficient way for sure and tracked
Well,
and all that good
yeah,
stuff.
and there's tools to help on like the pitch list creation. We use Podchaser, which is more for
Yeah.
agencies. And that's a great way for us to be able to find shows that we didn't otherwise know existed.
Mm.
They have some contact information. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not, but at least it pulls and gives us a starting point and we can go from there.
Yeah. That's great to know
Yeah.
for sure. Um, what are some of the mistakes with the follow up? Because I feel like the follow up can be kind of snarky. I don't know about you, but I've had some where it's kind of like, hey, did you see my email? And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
dude,
You're like, yeah, I was on vacation. Stop emailing
I
me four
know.
days
Back
later.
off, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest things we see is the follow up is too soon after the pitch.
Ah,
Like, give them at least a week of vacation. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, if you pitch on a Tuesday, don't follow up on a Thursday. So for us, we wait 2 weeks. And again, we're not pitching current events. We're not pitching like super timely topics. So it's really the beauty of podcast guesting as compared to
Yeah,
media
yeah.
relations. Like the cadence is so much more relaxed. So we'll follow up 2 weeks after the first pitch, and then we'll do our final follow up 2 weeks after that. I don't A lot of the language that we get in follow-ups is kind of like what you said. One, it's like they have befriended me without knowing me. Like, hey, Angie, I know you're probably busy. I just wanted to pop this back. Um, I don't know. It's just like an interesting language that I see in the follow-up that is, it makes me feel like they are trying to act like we know each other and are
Oh,
friends when in reality we don't. I'll have to pull some of it up. And we just take the original pitch email, reply to it so that the full pitch is in line, so the
yes.
host doesn't have to go find it. but also we don't need to spend a lot of time regurgitating what we've already shared,
Yeah,
you know? So I think it's just, again, send an email that you would want to receive, and you'll be head and shoulders above the competition.
agreed. And yeah, I have had some where they sent it Thursday and they said something on Tuesday. I'm like, I barely even had a chance to like go through my inbox.
Yeah, yeah,
Oy,
yeah. Boy is right.
I know. Um, so when it comes to you're guesting on shows and you know you want to pitch, when do you know whether it's okay for you to do it or to have a team do it?
I mean, it comes down, I do think it is a business skill that I don't think you need to know how to pitch yourself to podcast, right? But as a business owner, I think it is a valuable skill to strategically understand what are the types of audiences and people that I need to get in front of to grow this business, right? To grow my brand awareness. So I think strategically, the owner, whomever might be the, head of marketing, like someone needs to understand like the strategic side of guesting and putting yourself out in front of audiences. The rest of it really comes down to bandwidth,
Mm-hmm.
skill and knowledge, and finances. So, do you have the money to fully outsource? It typically is going to run people. I've seen some firms that charge like 1,200 a month, all the way up to 2,500 a month, and that's to get an average. It varies, but we tend to get our clients, once we get through the onboarding period, anywhere from 2 to 4 interviews a month. It just ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
So it is an expensive, form of outreach, especially for early stage businesses. But it also boils down to, well, what is me keeping this in house and potentially doing it myself preventing me from doing? Are there bigger growth opportunities that I, as the leader, could be engaging in if I got this part of it off my plate? So, it's really the owner, the leader, the decision maker deciding, is it worth it for us to keep it
Mm-hmm.
in-house? If you have a team that's in-house that is already doing some similar type of work, maybe you've got a copywriter, you've got someone doing marketing, they can probably figure it out with a little bit of guidance, and then it might make sense to keep it in-house.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as entrepreneurs, especially when we start out and we start to get like a little bit of a team, but it still can be super hard to like let those things go. And you feel like, oh, they won't do it very well. I'll just do it myself. But then what happens is then you just like, oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. I'll get to that
Yeah, you don't do
tomorrow.
it at all.
And then a month goes by and you're like, oh, I've got no visibility. I haven't guested on any
Yeah,
shows. And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, weighing those pros and cons. But at
And
least someone can like hire you, get all the strategy, get the system in place,
mhm.
and then offload it to a team. Like, I think that is brilliant because then you're not guessing, you're not winging it, and you're not trying to figure it all out on your own.
No, and you have someone to turn to when weird stuff comes up, which it does, right? When you don't get the acceptances that you think you should be getting, we can audit it. Like, let me see your pitch. Let
Mm,
me see your pitch list. Let me see what's happening. Is it a targeting, like
right.
are you going after the wrong shows? Are you pitching the wrong topic? Are you having the wrong conversations on these shows to where you're not getting the impact? There's a lot that goes into it.
Mm,
And the other thing I'll say is when people think, oh, my team's not going to do it as well as I would, they may not, you know what I mean? But they might do it better. And we all mess up.
yeah.
So, as much as I sit here and talk about the best way, to pitch and how to make that pitch feel as personal as you can, it's still cold outreach. And we got an email back yesterday that said, please remove me from your list. And I'm like, well, it's not even a list. Like, we personalize the pitch, but maybe not well enough. You know what I mean? So, you're gonna get that.
Yeah.
It's
I
rejection.
know.
We all get it at some point.
100%.
Yeah.
So, how many pitches do you feel like, or it's probably all over the map, but like how many pitches do you feel like you have to send out to get so many yeses?
hmm It's it depends. I know that's like
Yeah.
the worst
No,
answer
yeah.
ever.
I,
But part of it is so we have this one client and I am in charge of her account, and I don't have to send a lot of pitches to be able to book her because I know her messaging inside and out. She's been with us for over a year and a half. We've become friends. I know the exact type of show that's a good fit for
Mm,
her, and I can tweak her message perfectly. So there have been some months where I've pitched maybe like 8 shows for her, and we still get the number that we want
sweet.
for her in a given month. There's other clients that there was a time a year ago where we had a couple of clients where we're like, okay, we need to get 25 out per client. We were losing steam, not getting yeses. And, we just needed to up the number if we wanted to try to get some traction. And then
Yeah.
we can reevaluate. You can say, like, okay, well, who said yes? What type of show said yes? What was the
Yes.
topic that said yes? Can we lean into that a little bit more?
That's a great point, is looking at the results of what's working and what's not working. Even looking at the types of shows that you're
Mhm.
guesting on or that you're pitching. And yeah, like evaluating what's going well and what's not so that you can
Yeah.
tweak it. I think a lot of people are so just in the motions doing the things that they don't take a step back to review that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're getting acceptances on every pitch you're sending, I feel like you need to dream bigger, like pitch bigger
Ooh.
shows, right? Because it's like when we send out proposals. If they say yes within 5 minutes, I'm like, darn it, I should have upped my price. you know? So it's like that. If every pitch gets accepted, then we need to stretch to try to get on a show
Mm.
that's a little bit, perceived to be bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
And if no one is saying yes, look at your list. Are you sending, are you pitching shows that have been around for 5, 10 years and just might be too big for someone starting out
Yeah.
to land?
That's a great point, is what shows you are pitching. It's like, do you dream big? And do you approach those quote unquote bigger shows differently than you would another show, or do you approach them both the same?
So we always ask our clients, like, what's your dream podcast?
Yeah.
Like, give us your wish list. And it's always typically, a little outside of the realm of what we would actually get them on.
Yeah.
We try, and we've gotten clients on Amy Porterfield, Pat
Ooh.
McGee. Why is Pat, what, Pat
Flynn.
Flynn, what is wrong with me? Pat McGee is like a singer from college. What?
That's hilarious.
So we've gotten clients on bigger shows, but you often have to build up to it. And those are sometimes the shows, if you know there are tons of people trying to be a guest on, you really have to find like an opening. So we helped a client before get herself on Amy Porterfield, and she wrote the pitch. Well, we wrote the pitch in tandem with her. She sent the pitch, but we leveraged, hey, I know you have this launch coming up. I was a student in this program before, right? So you've got to have something really
Right.
strategic to catch the eye of the host. And then for the Pat Flynn episode, I saw it was a social post back during COVID that he posted on Instagram, and I got a ton of engagement. And my client interacted on it, and her comment drew a lot of additional comments. And so I
Ooh.
just sent him a DM and was like, hey, it looks like it was around women, COVID, hustle culture. I'm like, this is obviously a topic that it looks like your audience is interested in. Would you be up for having her on the show to dig into it? So it was that timely nature,
Yeah.
right? And we're not going to always spend that amount of time or brain power on shows that we can get with a solid topic, But yeah, the bigger shows, you have to be a little bit more strategic.
Yeah. But I think it's like timing and then seizing those opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think here's another good question, is not just emailing the pitches, but
Right.
using social media and DMing
Mhm.
to approach. Do you use that tactic a lot?
We do sometimes. I do a lot of LinkedIn outreach. A lot of it is my own curiosity, and I love interacting with podcast hosts. So if I find a show when I'm researching for a client and I see they're on LinkedIn, I'll send a connection request, and I'm not going to come in. Someone recently, he accepted my connection request and then he said, don't pitch slap me, which was basically like,
heard that phrase. That's
Oh, it's
hilarious.
amazing. So his point was like, don't turn around and pitch your client to me. And we, I think, are like fast friends now because I'm like, I love that. But you have to approach it
Yeah.
gingerly. There's the direct approach, which I also, if it's a timely topic, I'm not going to beat around the bush with Pat Flynn in
No,
the DMs for 3 days.
no.
I'm going to say like, hey, there's this thing going on
Yeah.
right now. But yeah, I think you got to find where they are, and a lot of times it's easier to connect with the host directly on a platform like LinkedIn or Instagram. And so if you know it's a perfect fit, I think
Yeah.
it makes sense to make that connection.
I know. And sometimes you can kind of follow your gut where it's like, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. I don't know.
Right. If that's what you're feeling, don't do it.
I know. So
Yeah.
true. Any last tips for entrepreneurs or teams that are pitching for their clients?
I mean, I would just say again, it talked about the idea of B plus work, and that has always been a theme for me. It is so much of a better strategy to take that like first step and start sending pitches so that you have information to make decisions on, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting there and you've had guesting on podcasts as one of your Q1, Q2, Q3 goals, and you haven't taken any action on it, it's likely time to at least engage a leader in the space to see what's the next logical step for me. So it might be testing it out on your own. It might be having someone come up with strategy and you implementing. Who knows? But it's just the idea of, if it's been on your list for a while, either do it or
Hmm.
get someone to help you figure out how to do it, if you should do it. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it can feel scary putting yourself out there. You know what I
for
mean?
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think most of our clients hire us because they don't want to get the no's. They want us to,
Yeah.
get the
Oh,
emails
that's
that
so
are like, no
true.
thanks. Yeah. So I'm like,
Yeah.
just another day when we get a no. It's fine.
Yeah. It just,
Yeah.
you're one step closer to a yes. That's all.
Yeah. Exactly.
Love it. How can people find you, Angie, and learn more about how you can help them get on more shows?
Yeah, personally, I'm on LinkedIn at Angie Trueblood. Definitely send me a connection request. Let me know that you heard me on Lindsay's podcast, and we'll become fast friends. You can check out some of our service offerings on the website, thepodwisegroup.com. And if you want to see how I fix pitches, you can sign up for the flop files at thepodwisegroup.com/flop files.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation and your tips and insights. I don't think a lot of people talk about having that team to pitch and
Hmm.
kind of dialing in that process and actually having a strategy behind it. And you just automatically think you have to like figure it out on your own. So to have someone
Wow.
to be able to help and strategize and get that done is super helpful.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, great convo. All
Yep.
right, folks, that's a wrap for this week. And we'll see you next week on the Leverage Your Podcast Show.